Has Jahmyr Gibbs emerged as the league winner in 2025? And is he the 101 heading into 2026? Plus, Scott and I are going to review our FFPC main event teams and a couple of our 350s that are still rocking, ready for the FFPC playoffs.
What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast, Theo Greminger and Scott Barrett every single week. Thanksgiving week here at Fantasy Points. Scott, how fired up are you? And are you playing the 3-game Thanksgiving slate, or are you just sitting back in the weeds until the main slate?
I actually don't. I've never profited a Thanksgiving slate, but then I always destroy the Sunday following Thanksgiving. Everyone's a little, I don't know, turkey drunk or I don't know what, but yeah, I always crush that. So I'll go light. I'll play a little on Thursday and then I'll go heavy on Sunday.
Yeah, we have an unbelievable set of games. I mean, this is probably the most excited I've been from a fantasy football lens for the 3 games we have. I mean, it's incredible. You get the Detroit Green Bay game is about as good as it gets. It's a meaningful game too. Both teams need a win. Dallas, Kansas City, incredible. And then the Cincinnati return of Ja'Marr Chase, Joe Burrow, Baltimore Ravens are hot. An awesome way to end the night. And then the Black Friday game, Chicago is leading the NFC North, and they're going into Philly. That's a fun one as well. What game are you most excited about?
Probably Chiefs Cowboys. That sounds fun to me.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the one that tilts over. But we got to talk about what happened last week in Week 12. One of the biggest performances ever at the running back position. The 7th most fantasy football points scored since the year 2000. 11th most all-time. This is, of course, from Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs goes absolutely nuclear. 55 PPR points. The incredible efficiency that we associate with him all the time. 15 carries to get 219 yards. And he also adds 11 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. This was the most fantasy points since the Alvin Kamara game in 2020 that won everyone the money in Week 17. Scott, your thoughts on Jahmyr Gibbs' performance? Is he separating himself from the pack here? Just can this hold up? I mean, we saw this last year too. End of the year, Jahmyr Gibbs hit so hard.
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again. He led off the Everything Report talking about this using a Pepe Sylvia meme, but yeah, it's very reminiscent of what we saw at the tail end of last season. A significant bump in usage with Dan Campbell calling plays. You see the snap share going up, the raw volume going up. Here's an insane stat. Since Dan Campbell took over play calling duties, Jahmyr Gibbs leads all players in targets per route run. And this was, a really special, really dynamic pass catcher. I said the best pass catching running back to come out since Christian McCaffrey, who is the best since Alvin Kamara. And so he has that. He also ranks first all time in yards per carry. And so, in the article, I talk about how over his last 16 games, he averages 26.3 fantasy points per game, which just breaks leagues. In the top 50% of those games, 36.7 fantasy points per game. And he did all that with a worse workload than what he has now. He's averaging 65% of the team snaps, 20.2 XFP per game. Over the last year, when he broke leagues during that playoff stretch run, it was the same exact numbers, 65% snap share, 20.2 XFP per game. So yeah, just for, one of the most skilled, talented players in football, who's dynamic as both a runner and a pass catcher, any uptick in volume is going to go a long way. And this seems like a really significant one, especially in the passing game. So yeah, that's something Ryan and I were debating is would you have him above Jonathan Taylor? We were both like, easy yes. We would have him above anyone except for Christian McCaffrey. And maybe you would have him above anyone.
I'd have him above anyone. I think that we saw it again last year with Gibbs. I know that the offensive environment is fantastic. I get it. Christian McCaffrey is playing unbelievable football. We're getting all the targets. Gibbs is just so much more explosive as a runner right now than McCaffrey. The home run hitting ability, the long touchdowns, they're there on a consistent basis. Taylor, you could make I think a stronger argument for Taylor. I know we've gone back and forth on this, the two of us, who's going to finish as the RB1 overall. I think it's not necessarily important. I think that all three of them are just in fantastic shape down the stretch. But if I had to bet on one of them to have the most fantasy points from now until championship week, it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's unbelievable. And Scott, just taking a kind of a forward-thinking approach, shameless promotion. I had Dave Kluge on Fantasy Football Daily. We dropped our early 2026 rankings, sort of for the real ones out there, where the ball doesn't stop after the fantasy football playoffs, getting an early start here. I came up with Jahmyr Gibbs as the 101 in 2026. Dave didn't go that way, but I think by the time we get to June, July, I think it might be Jahmyr Gibbs as the chalky 101, because I think he's going to finish the year strongly. And the whole argument against him in the past two redraft seasons was the presence of David Montgomery, the role of David Montgomery. That ship is sort of sailing. Montgomery's also going to be 29 years old. I think Montgomery's role will be a little bit more like direct handcuff next year, and Gibbs is going to be on just a pathway to having just an unbelievable season. So where are you at? Where do you think like an initial lean? Are you kind of there? I know you're not thinking about 2026 at all, but people love hearing about this time of year.
Yeah, I think that's right. I actually had Jahmyr Gibbs as my RB1 this season. Something I flip-flopped back and forth on quite a bit, but did in the final push of the article settle on him as the overall RB1. So yeah, of course, would be happy to run that back in 2026.
Yeah, 100%. We've also got to talk about what's going on in Dallas. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. This is a really, really fun conversation. I think that the answer is both are going to smash for the rest of the season. But right now, George Pickens is at 20 points per game, sort of continues this trend of traded wide receivers smashing almost each and every year. We get at least one of these guys. But Pickens has taken his game to another level. And Scott, we talked about this a couple weeks back where when CeeDee Lamb returned, Pickens was coming off of like two big 30-plus point performances. And, we saw the first game where Lamb outscored him, had a lot more targets, but it's been pretty even over a 5-game sample. 3 out of 5 games, George Pickens has outscored him, and it's been consecutive 29-point games with Lamb in the lineup. So sort of what are you doing with this situation? How can you unpack it? Do you think this is the way it's going to shake out for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so one of the worst takes you've heard all year was from me early on in the season where I called, I don't know, I just really nitpicked George Pickens. I said he was, one-dimensional. I didn't think he could be a fantasy superstar. I thought, CeeDee Lamb would out-alpha him whenever he was on the field. And no, dude, this is just one of the best wide receivers in football. I had to go back and re-listen to something I do at least once every year, Charlie Munger's speech, Harvard speech. I'm making Ryan Heath listen to it as well. It's just like, a lot of my worst calls are always, because of emotion instead of, the numbers or logic, falling victim to various cognitive biases. And I really think it was just, I was so high on him last year. I'm like, dude, Pickens is an elite receiver. All the numbers back it up. And because he burned me last year, which really, I think it was just Pittsburgh using him the wrong way. I just could not buy into this, but dude, he is so freaking unbelievable. I had this stat, this tweet today, which I just thought was so killer. Kind of stealing from Jacob Gibbs a little bit, but he's a top 5 separator. He ranks 4th in separation win rate. He's top 5 after the catch. He ranks top 3 in yards after contact per reception, top 5 in missed tackles forced. And then he's easily number 1 in hero catches over the last 2 years, which means he's easily the best wide receiver at the catch point. So separation after the catch and at the catch point, he does it all. He is freaking unbelievable. He is such a superstar. And a lot of like great film analysts were on this early. Greg Cosell, since he was coming out, was saying this is, a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL, and he doubled down, tripled down every year. I regret not doing the same. And so, yeah, you brought this up as in comparison to CeeDee Lamb. And so, like, part of this was that, yeah, CeeDee Lamb is very clearly the target earner. In fact, he's blowing Pickens out of the water. He's in healthy games. I think Pickens has beat him in target share only once, and first read target share only once. But XFP per game in healthy games, CeeDee Lamb is number one. He's above Ja'Marr Chase comfortably. And George Pickens is just 13th in XFP per game when CeeDee Lamb is healthy. So there's this clear discrepancy in volume. The production hasn't been there for Lamb. He's actually fantasy football's least efficient player since week 8. George Pickens ranks number 2 over the same span, so behind only JSN. Again, that's a testament to what he's doing after the catch and at the catch point. And so people want to know what's wrong with CeeDee Lamb. You can point to a report from Lisa Salters a couple weeks back that said Lamb might only just now be getting back to full health. That could be part of it. He's had some uncharacteristic drops these past 2 weeks. The head coach today said expect heavy target volume on Thanksgiving. That's very unlike CeeDee. We have full confidence in him. We're going to go right back to him. Expect heavy target volume on Thursday. And then there's also just bad luck. He's had a league high 43 fantasy points wiped out due to penalties, plays negated due to penalty, DPIs. George Pickens is actually third on this list, but still like 20 points behind. And so all this to say, I think Dallas has 2 mid-range wide receiver ones. CeeDee Lamb has the volume. Pickens has the freakish hyper efficiency. And this offense can definitely support 2 mid-range wide receiver ones. Dallas, Dak Prescott easily, comfortably leading in catchable targets per game, catchable air yards per game. So yeah, this is just, one of the best duos we've seen in a long time, maybe better than Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, when we start looking back on the best wide receiver duos, sort of the peak duos of the last 10 years, you have to start talking about Pickens and Lamb this season. I think we're going to see some big-time Lamb games down the stretch here in addition to Pickens. The offense really supports them. We saw the way they were able to come back against Philadelphia. This team cares a lot. This team has a ton of juice. And I think it's a team that maybe is not an NFC contender, but every week this offense is putting up points. The Kansas City game is going to be awesome. Pickens is so interesting because I think one of the biggest storylines this offseason is going to be sort of, what does Dallas do with him? It would make sense for Dallas to give him a nice long-term contract. The chance that he's either in this 1A, 1B with CeeDee Lamb, or potentially due to the age discrepancy, maybe he eventually can flip CeeDee Lamb in terms of value and role on the team. I'm worried they're going to franchise tag him, Scott, which I think could be a big variable that we don't want to necessarily deal with Pickens, who's been in such good shape in terms of a locker room presence. The team loves him. He seems to love Dallas. The media loves him there. The beat reporters love him. And I just think that the variable of him not being allowed to leave and not getting a long-term contract and being tagged could sort of be an annoying thing. But I'm hoping that they just re-sign him and we get this next year. I think this is something that's unbelievable to see these two level of wide receivers. Fully expect Lamb to sort of get it together. And I think Pickens end of the year is going to be a lock to finish inside the top 5 in terms of fantasy scoring. Just unbelievable stuff. And looking through fantasy points data, Scott, you can kind of compare the two of them, all the stats that you referenced. You can see that they both have a very similar first read rate. And there's an opportunity for people to get the same data that you're using for the Everything Report every single week for the lowest price I've ever seen for a fantasy point subscription. We have our Black Friday sale coming up. Why don't you let everybody know about that?
Yeah, that's right. If you want to be a football genius, if you want to be, an elite data nerd, you're going to need fantasy points data, the best in the game. If that's not for you, if you just want to make some money playing DFS or cashing bets, a premium sub is good for you, or you can get best of all possible worlds with an all-in subscription. For Black Friday and Black Friday only, fantasy points premium, $18 for the rest of the year. That's good through, I don't know, late March. Fantasy points data, just $20, all in $40. Again, that's not per week. That's not per month. It's for the rest of the year. So there's 18 regular season weeks. There's all these playoff weeks. There's, draft season. After that, free agency, best ball. So $18 for premium, 20 for data, 40 for all in.
Yeah, and all of our NFL draft coverage we're going to be planning on, the Dynasty rookie draft coverage we're going to be planning on. This is like your best, because we're always talking about sort of the all-in package and the power of fantasy points data. This is like your best chance to get it, have it for the rest of the season, and see how it can help you in your fantasy playoffs. Like, put us to the test. You're going to love it. It's fantastic stuff, and the prices are ridiculously low on Black Friday. All right, Scott, we got to talk about it. Got to have a low-key flex here. We drafted a few FFPC main event teams, as well as a couple of 350s. We did it live for the Fantasy Points YouTube audience. We also had a podcast on Fantasy Football Daily. We did one on School of Scott. So a lot of the audience saw us draft, enjoyed it. We took some heat for some of our picks in the YouTube comments. Some people loved our drafts. Well, at the end of the day, we've sort of run pure. We've been able to sustain injuries, roll with the punches. We drafted 3 main event teams. One of them finished third, so we're in the fantasy playoffs. One of them finished second, so we won money, and we're already into the 3-week sprint in the weeks 15 through 17. We're also in the 2-week sprint to try to win some more money. And then we have another team that finished first that is currently in 17th overall. We drafted that one with a B-Bag Batoba. That team, of course, won some money, and we've already qualified for the weeks 15 through 17. So we might go 3 for 3 here. Your thoughts on our FFPC hot streak here?
Yeah. I think we crushed it. We also, did you mention that we're top 20 overall?
17
in
overall.
The main event
17 overall.
That's crazy. Yeah. We of course we made the playoffs and crushed Evan Silva in that one league where he did not make the playoffs. We did pretty great. I think this was like a really good teach tape. I had a bunch of people, a bunch of high stakes pros reach out to me saying they loved our live streams or videos, us talking about the process. And then of course, a number of subscribers who reached out after the fact saying, they drafted a team and watching a few of ours made it easy, knowing how the experts think, how the pros think. We'll have to do it again next year. We're going to have money to play around with, but maybe we paywall it so we don't give away too much of that edge.
I don't know. People love watching it on the YouTube. Let's talk about it a little bit, because I think there's some lesson learned, and we're going to talk about sort of breaking down some of the picks we made, some of the rankings you had, our preseason takes. We can sort of break that down in a couple of weeks when the season's over. But I think it's interesting, Scott, because the first round for the team that's 17 overall, we took Justin Jefferson at the 106, which was one of the worst picks you could have made in round one. Certainly a bottom 4 pick. Brian Thomas would have been a worse pick, certainly. Malik Neighbors, because he got hurt, would have been a worse pick. But after that, Justin Jefferson's provided almost no edge. He's averaging 13.8 points per game this season. But it was really round 2 and round 3 that sort of spoke to your theory on upside wins championships and your theory on power law guys.
I think the whole draft did. If I could just walk everyone down through our board, it was round 1, Justin Jefferson, round 2, Devon Achane, round 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba, round 4, Jaden Daniels, round 5, Cortland Sutton. I don't know what happened there. Round 6, Rashee Rice, round 7, Deebo Samuel, round 8, Jake Ferguson, round 9, Cam Scatterbo. And so you have, one of the worst round 1 picks you could make. Nailed round 2, Devon Achane, power law player. Nailed round 3, JSN, best pick you could have made in round 3. Jaden Daniels, dead pick, wasted pick. This kind of speaks to us saying quarterbacks really don't matter unless you get a true, highest end quarterback. Cortland Sutton, wasted pick. Rashee Rice, best pick you could have made. Deebo Samuel, meh. Jake Ferguson, Cam Scatterbo, valuable for 6 to 8 weeks, but not really doing much.
Just to interject, the Scatterbo one, some people might say oh, he got injured, but that pick mattered a lot because he ran so pure in the weeks that he started, and in FFPC main events, total points matter. Record matters as well, but total points matters an awful lot. So we had
and it matters to the tournament prize that we're chasing.
Yes.
Like we're talking about, hey, we already won money on this league, and if we win the championship 2 weeks from now, that's more money. But we're really chasing the week 17, the tournament bonus rounds. And so anyway, this is the draft, and then like the later rounds, just about everyone was a whiff outside of Rico Dowdle, which is one of the best late round picks you can make. And this is top 20 overall. By the way, this is a huge testament to you and Abib as working the waiver wire and making the optimal start sits. But yeah, you see a lot of wasted picks, a lot of just like borderline zeros. And then just, this is what I say with Upside Wins Championships is like every year there's really, it feels like only 4 to 8 players who actually matter. And it's just having as many of those as possible. And then just doing your due diligence, working hard on the waiver wire and with start sits. And that's how you win leagues. And that's how you have killer, like, what was it? 2021. I had one FFPC team and it also finished top 15. It was the highest scoring non-Christian McCaffrey team. And I would have loved to have Christian McCaffrey that year. I just didn't have the draft slot. And what happened was I had Lamar Jackson, I had Mark Andrews, I had, the other 2 power law players you needed. And it doesn't matter if you whiffed, if you had 3 or 4 of those, but you whiffed on 50% of your first 10 picks outside of that, doesn't matter. It's just getting those, you had to have it players, as many of those as possible is to me what really moves the needle.
100% agree with you. And for our other 2 teams, we had a Drake May team, which is sort of self-explanatory, one of the best quarterback picks you could have made. The other team, we had Jalen Hurts. So we built quarterback in several different ways there. I guess Hurts was somewhat comparable to Daniels. What's crazy, though, is we have that one team that finished second overall, and we had literally no running backs because we took another extreme zero team where we took another extreme anchor team, but we took Omarion Hampton, and then we were getting by with Scadaboo, lose both of those guys, and we've been like living on a prayer at the running back position, but we've run pure when we needed to. We had Bam Knight in like every week that Bam Knight scored points, we had him in. We had Sean Tucker. We were probably one of the only teams in the FFPC main event to use Sean Tucker during his like RB2 overall week. So we banked that one. And now we're going into the playoffs. We're already qualified. We're getting Omarion Hampton back potentially. So that team ran pure. We had Tucker Kraft on 2 teams, and we were able to overcome that with guys like Colston Loveland and Theo Johnson. So I think like one thing that sort of the takeaway here is for a lot of fantasy managers is, draft the league winners, which is very simplistic, but Scott's hit on them at a very high rate. I think that I was on a couple of these guys. I certainly was higher on JSN than consensus. I know Ryan Heath was on a number of these guys. Like with your fantasy point subscription, you're going to have access to Scott's draft targets, also Ryan Heath's, also mine. And we hit really well on those guys. So you don't have to be right on every single round, Scott. But like you said, if you can identify a few power law players, that gives you an edge. The other altruism is, like you said, the waiver wire. And I'll say Abib and I hit the waiver wire pretty hard on these 2 teams, but it's one of the truest statements in fantasy is the waiver wire is so essential. Even in 20-man formats like FFPC, we're basically able to churn out some wins here. So I hope we run pure. We've got one team that really, really needs a win this week. That team is pretty much even. We're projected to have like 140. The team we're playing is projected to have like 144. So it's like a very even matchup. The team where we're in like running back hell, we actually have a start-sit decision that I thought we could do sort of on the air here just for fun. Let me pull up the team because we have a couple of very tilting start-sit decisions here. This team lost Drake London, so we're hoping we get him back for the playoffs, but I'm not holding my breath. Of course, Omarion Hampton would be very, very helpful for this team that has no running backs, but we have a flex that we're going to have to probably use Christian Watson Luther Burden or Jordan Addison. So again, it's Luther Burden, who's been coming on but still not really trustworthy playing Philly. Christian Watson on the road in Detroit is my initial lean. And then Jordan Addison coming off of a goose egg on the road in Seattle with maybe Max Brosmer at quarterback. It's a tilting decision here. Again, this is for a lot of money. If you win in this week, you're guaranteed first or second place, which is another big payout for the playoff prizes before you get to the sprint. So where are you at on this one?
I think this one's easy.
Watson.
Where do you think I'm leaning?
I think you're leaning Christian Watson.
Yeah. I mean, just he's had at least 45 receiving yards in all 5 of his games, despite starting off in just a part-time role. But now he's full-time player. 88% route share last week. Romeo Doubs fell down to 67%. He's been first read target on at least a third of Jordan Love's throws these last 2 weeks. And yeah, he looks awesome. This is a player we were always maybe too high on. And so, yeah, I just pulled up Chris Weck's projections. He's even higher on Watson than I am. I know this is like, we're recording mid Tuesday, so it's very early in the week, although, this is going to be sharper than, Vegas lines. Tuesdays are always a great time to play some bets based on our projections, even if Chris, is going to have some amendments probably tonight, tomorrow morning. Has Christian Watson projected for 14.2 fantasy points. That's 3 more than Jameson Williams almost. So yeah, I feel really good about that one.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to manifest a Christian Watson smash game on Thanksgiving. So anyway, let us know in the YouTube comments. Would you go with Watson?
Vintage Calvin Johnson, vintage Robbie Anderson.
I'm going to manifest peak Josh Gordon. That's what I'm manifesting. Okay. I'm manifesting peak Josh Gordon.
Did he have a big Thanksgiving? I don't remember.
Oh, no. I thought we were just manifesting alphas. You're talking about classic Thanksgiving games. That makes a lot more sense.
So Calvin Johnson used to score like 30 fantasy points every Thanksgiving. I know Robbie Anderson had a 3 touchdown game once. And then I think Jordy Nelson went crazy one Thanksgiving. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I'm all about it for sure. So
Tony Romo, not great on Thanksgiving. I remember that.
And then a big shout out to Rich Hribar. We also have a 350 where that team is finished 3rd, but that team's like running pure. So hopefully when Rich comes back on School of Scott, we'll have a chance to review a championship with that team. So yeah, those were really fun. We'll give updates on these teams. Hopefully next week it's a happy update and we're in the championship game. A few weeks back, the two of us had a conversation over who's going to finish as the QB1 this year in points per game rest of the way. I said Patrick Mahomes. You said Lamar Jackson. Both of these guys have been on major downward slumps here. I mean, Mahomes, the last 3 weeks has been a huge step back from what we saw from the beginning of the season. Lamar Jackson, it's incredible. Lamar Jackson started out the season with top 4 QB performances in the first 3 weeks of the year. I mean, we can go back and think about just how incredible that Buffalo game was. Then Lamar Jackson comes back from injury and has a 4-touchdown game against Miami where it was minimal. It's minimal passing production in terms of yardage, but he was just so sharp. They lit up Miami, 4 passing touchdowns. And since then, it's just been catastrophic. And we've seen a complete lack of rushing production from Lamar Jackson. Started out the year with 70 yards and a touchdown against Buffalo. Scott, over the last month, he has only 1 game with more than 15 rushing yards and 0 rushing scores. And then the passing touchdowns, take away the Miami game, over the last 3 weeks, 1 passing touchdown, 2 interceptions, and he hasn't broke 200 passing yards in any of those 3 games. This is catastrophic for Lamar Jackson managers.
Yeah, it's really bad, and I think it's because he's not healthy. He said he's fine. It's not injury, although like he was dressed like a mummy.
That was that was one of your best tweets. The guy
Yeah,
comes out
it got like
in a hoodie and like a full like white hoodie, like a compression one, with like the gator
it's
on
like a
the neck.
ski mask
And
almost.
you
Yeah.
said you said if he's not hurt, why is he in a full body cast? I laughed out loud. It was very, very good timing.
Um, but yeah, he's definitely hurt. Like I don't think there's any explanation for it. Like you said, held under 15 rushing yards in 3 of 4 games since returning from injury. He eclipsed that in 18 of 19 games last year. And then through the air, he went 29 straight games with a passing touchdown. No other quarterback had more than 17. And then he hasn't had a touchdown these last 2 weeks. And so what's going on is what makes Lamar Jackson is he can destroy you with his legs. He's really one of the most mobile, one of the most gifted running quarterbacks of all time. And he has this hamstring injury, which hamstrings are notorious to linger. I don't know how many times I've said that in the Everything Report or on this podcast over the last 5 years, notorious for lasting way longer than anyone would expect. And so with that, Lamar Jackson is not Lamar Jackson. And then defenses can actually play the pass because they're not scared of him beating you with the run. And like that was the cheat code with Lamar Jackson. Like he's not the greatest pocket passer, but because of how defenses have to play him, he's always at an advantage through the air. And so now defenses can play him honestly. And yeah, I wouldn't think it's a stretch to say a less mobile Lamar Jackson's a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL, when I believe a fully healthy Lamar Jackson is a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. So, I mean, he's going to get healthier, is what you have to look forward to. But it's going to be like a progressive improvement every single week. And then with Patrick Mahomes, I think it's what I've been talking about since, what is it, Brock Purdy's sophomore year, where I'm like, guys, Patrick Mahomes isn't a good deep threat anymore. Patrick Mahomes is turning into Alex Smith. And I was destroyed. I was trashed. I'm an idiot. And then the next year I doubled down. I say the exact same thing. You're an idiot. You don't know anything. And now I say it and it's like, yeah, everyone knows that. Patrick Mahomes himself came out and said it. He said, hey, what's going on these past few weeks? He's saying, oh, teams are playing way more man coverage against them. And you see this if you pull up fantasy points data, the coverage matrix. They're playing more man coverage against us, and they're going to continue to play more man coverage against us until we show we can beat them deep. Are they going to be able to? I'm not super bullish. I don't think they have the personnel. I think Patrick Mahomes, I think he's honestly an overrated deep ball passer. I don't think that's what makes him elite. I think he does the little things exceptionally well. And him and Josh Allen are like the 2 best sack evaders in NFL history. I think that's what makes them really special. But obviously Xavier Worthy, one of the worst deep ball trackers in a long time, except he's just really fast, but that's overrated and all these other things. So one of the stats I had was he ranks since Tyreek Hill left, Patrick Mahomes ranks bottom 3 of like 40 quarterbacks in deep ball passer rating. Derek Carr has 21 more deep ball passing touchdowns since Tyreek Hill left. And so I'm not super bullish this improves, but the caveat here is not only was he playing a lot of really good defenses, but a lot of defenses that are much better against in man, especially like the Colts, now that they have Sauce Gardner. The Broncos live in man. They're so good at man. They're an elite pass defense. And so that's going to come down. It's softer matchups. Teams that even if they want to play man don't have the personnel to play man. And then, of course, they're facing the Cowboys, which the Cowboys live in zone and they have the worst defense in football. So Patrick Mahomes is going to go nuclear this Thursday. He might even connect on a few deep balls, maybe to Tyquan Thornton instead of Xavier Worthy. But and the other thing too is even if you do play man against Patrick Mahomes, he could run all over you. When you're playing man coverage, defensive backs turn their backs to their quarterback, so it's a bit easier to rack up yards on the ground. And you did see that his first 7-8 weeks, a much more mobile Patrick Mahomes. So I would be more bullish on Mahomes than Lamar, but I kind of don't think either one is right now in the running to finish as the overall QB1.
Yeah, no, I would agree on that one. I think with Mahomes, Rashee Rice is playing at an exceptional level. I think they're going to be moving the chains a lot. I just worry about, and I know you talked about Rashee Rice, but you also, in the Everything Report, you wrote about Derrick Henry, and you seem to write about him pretty much every week the last month or so. You've talked about this schedule and how they're just going to sort of lean on Derrick Henry, how he's got sort of league-winning upside. I had Ryan Heath on Fantasy Football Daily. Ryan also shared your exact same thoughts on this one. Ryan's sort of all in on the big dog as well. Derrick Henry just looks like the player they're going to lean on. And I think that this is going to...
They should.
And they should. I agree, like completely agree on that one. Maybe it's sort of, you'll see Lamar Jackson sort of scrambling more, taking more chances as a runner if they get to the NFL playoffs. Maybe you'll see it in week 16, week 17 if they're desperate. But I think leaning on Derrick Henry and letting Patrick Mahomes sort of avoid the big hits, he's banged up still, I think that sort of makes the most sense for this team. It's just terrible, though, because Lamar Jackson, of course, was drafted as the QB1 overall in most drafts, and you didn't get this sort of bailout when Lamar Jackson came back from injury. So huge catastrophic one there. Mahomes is actually going to finish as an ADP winner based on where he was drafted.
I think he's still QB2 right now.
QB2, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. QB2, and we were seeing him being drafted with that massive tier break when it was like the Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, then tier break, then it was Mahomes. So Mahomes was a significant edge pick still, even with the last 3 weeks, just because of how impactful he was beginning of the season. So yeah, Derrick Henry, Rashee Rice, completely locked in. I completely agree with you that Mahomes could have a huge game against Dallas. I think that game also just the game flow, like, if I was going to chase a DFS game that day, it would definitely be Dallas, Kansas City. So hopefully we see some big ramp up there. Really, really interesting stuff, though, to see these sort of quarterbacks struggle, especially Lamar Jackson. It's very, very tilting. Scott, let's talk about a couple of other things here. Let's talk about Trey Benson and Omarion Hampton. Today we saw some footage of Omarion Hampton at practice. Scott, to me, he looks like he's ready to rock. Like Omarion Hampton, I would actually be surprised if he doesn't play this
You might
week.
be wish casting, though, because you have so much Omarion Hampton. We both do.
But I am wish casting. But anybody who's watching us on YouTube or listening to the podcast, go and watch the tape from practice. This guy looks ready to go. My question to you is, we saw Hampton in weeks 3 through 5 take a major step forward, had at least 5 receptions in 3 straight games, had 2 games where he scored like 24 points or more, and then the other game he had 13 points. So really scoring at a very high level. That's an over 20 point per game average for him in that stretch. Was really trending up. I was, victory lapping, and now I've had to endure not having him. A lot has changed with LA. Oronde Gadsden has emerged. We've seen Ladd McConkey sort of flip the script on beginning of the season. We were really worried about Ladd, and we were thinking Quentin Johnston could be this exceptional league winner. There's been sort of a flippening there. Gadsden, McConkey, the change with Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen getting old as the season moves along, being less impactful for fantasy every single week to the point that he's on our benches, and offensive line injuries. Do you think that fantasy managers can expect Omarion Hampton to step back in and be like a at least 15 point per game scorer? Should we temper expectations here? Your thoughts?
I think it's somewhere around there. I will say, they lost another starting offensive lineman. They're down 3 starting offensive linemen. So the offensive line isn't great. And then he has the Raiders this week, then the Eagles, then the Chiefs, and the Cowboys, then the Texans. So Raiders are a good matchup. Cowboys are a great matchup, but the other 3 are bottom 5. So it's just going to be volatile week to week. And, maybe this is just a super pass heavy offense now. And it kind of needs to be. So I do think a lot hinges on him maintaining the sort of PPR cheat code upside he flashed at the tail end before that injury.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily worry about them protecting Omarion Hampton. I know there's been a couple of beat reporters talking about that in LA. Do they sort of limit his touches? LA's playing for a lot here. They're playing for, they're looking like a playoff team. They're a team that has a winning record. Them sort of easing Omarion Hampton in, I'm not necessarily fearful of that. For me, it's the receiving work. Is that something that's going to carry on? Or again, coming out of the bye week, do we see that role sort of diminish? So I don't know. I'm hopeful for 15 points per game. It would certainly help the two of us out a lot to be able to play him ahead of like Devin Neal and Sean Tucker this week. So we're really rooting for you, Omarion. Now, Trey Benson is super interesting because when we had Trey Benson taking over for James Conner, there was a collective enthusiasm in fantasy football about Benson being like a potential league winner at the running back position, taking on this very exciting role. We had one game with Benson taking on like a big high volume role, and it sort of never really came into fruition. It was like 13 touches. Then the next week he gets injured. So Benson really didn't do anything with his opportunities, but he's still been a guy that everybody's holding out hope for. Scott, it's amazing. The Cardinals are 3-8, but they're a team we're constantly talking about for fantasy football. That's just a whole nother story. But your expectations for Trey Benson, I'll say that Bam Knight, they got way more out of Bam Knight than a lot of people anticipated. Michael Carter had two impactful games. One game he was really, really good. Another game he sort of got you by. So they've been able to kind of churn out running back production with guys who might not be in the league next year. Your thoughts on Trey Benson taking on this full-time role? Are you bullish on Benson? Are you sort of like meh on him?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't really dug into it too much. Ryan Heath wrote this blurb in the Everything Report, and I haven't circled back around on it. This is like annoying to me just because of how much money Jacoby Brissett has made the both of us in DFS these past few weeks. Over the last 3, he has 30 more completions than any other quarterback. So it's not just his production, but it's also the production funneling to Michael Wilson and Trey McBride and Greg Dortch, and that triple stack in DFS has been a print fest for us. Trey Benson, an exciting player. I was really high on him coming out. I thought he was underrated. Missed tackle force machine and whatnot. But I will say, I don't know. We're talking redraft here. He's a dynasty darling, but he really hasn't shown us much at the NFL level. And who's to say him or Omarion Hampton is coming back at 100% full effectiveness. And maybe this offense is just, runs through the passing game now. Drew Petzig, fully in his bag, trying to get this New York Giants head coaching gig, is gonna flex in the NFL a little bit. Like, look what I can do with Jacoby freaking Brissett. So I don't really know.
Well, I think you kind of made an argument for it in your talking just now about Brissett, because you talked about all the pass attempts. And if you look at just the receptions from Michael Carter had 3 catches this week, 5 catches last week. We've seen Bam Knight also catching passes out of the backfield. So maybe Benson.
But have we ever seen Trey Benson do it at the? Well, you know what? He did do it before that injury.
Yeah, and I think he could.
He didn't do it in college at all, but he did do it his last 3 games.
He can be an opportunistic pass catcher. Bam Knight has 4 catches in back-to-back weeks. I mean, if we're seeing Trey Benson just take on the snaps and these guys get sort of nuked, then Benson can get you your 50 to 65 rushing yards. Maybe he falls in the end zone. But if Benson can add 4 catches just on Jacoby Brissett being this, I mean, what Brissett's doing is just unbelievable. A big shout out to Trey McBride. Every single week we talk about him finishing as the tight end 1 overall. That streak ends and he still finishes as tight end 2 overall. Unbelievable stuff. Michael Wilson, we talked about him last week. Back-to-back weeks. Michael Wilson with 33 targets over the last 2 weeks. Jacoby Brissett is a kingmaker this year in fantasy football for us. So, yeah, I think you sort of talked me into Trey Benson. I think he's going back into some lineups for me if he plays this week. So very, very interesting stuff there, Scott. Omarion Hampton, we're rooting for you. Trey Benson, I think you're going to do well. Let's talk about another couple of backfields that are changing. We saw Chicago this past week. DeAndre Swift fumbles, and then Kyle Monangai didn't score a ton, but the usage, very, very promising, played ahead of DeAndre Swift. Do you think this is something that we're going to see this week against Philly? Do you think this is a changing of the guard, or do you think this was just punishment from Ben Johnson for DeAndre Swift fumbling early in the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really trust it or have a lean one way or the other. I also don't think it really matters, especially not this week against the Eagles. It's a low upside committee backfield in a pass heavy offense. It just isn't meaningful to me.
Yeah, I think that's probably
I mean,
fair.
if you're desperate for a running back, you could start either one, but neither is going to be a guy I'm ever excited to start unless DeAndre Swift is just dead, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, me neither. I think I'm still going to lean with Swift. I think this was more of just a punishment thing. How about Seattle? We're starting to get a little bit excited about Kenneth Walker. What are you seeing over the last 2 weeks? Walker played 65% of snaps this past week, went north of 50 last week, had only like 13 points this week, but it feels like we're heading in the right direction and he should be a locked-in player in the fantasy playoffs. Do you share that, or do you worry about a rug pull here? Are you a little nervous?
No, God, I hope so. This all aligns with the coach speak, which was very, very weird. It was all glowing up until week 1, and then it was very weird for 8 weeks, and then it was trending positive, and now it's glowing, and he has the usage and volume to match last week best usage and volume in any game this season where Zach Charbonnet was healthy. 65% carry share, 15% target share, 64% snap share. That's great. This is like, for a player who we know is hyper efficient in a really valuable offense, this is mid-range RB2 or better volume. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'd put it. I mean, this is one of my worst misses, have a lot of angry DMs over Kenneth Walker. So I would love nothing more for him to just go nuclear. Throughout the stretch and throughout the fantasy playoffs. If he's the guy you needed to have, that would be very excellent for me.
Yeah, Ryan Heath and I were both on this last week. So, again, 13 points is nothing I'm going to get too excited about. But I think with Walker, if he's getting this sort of snap share with his explosive big playability, he's a player that I want to break ties with. So let's see your conviction here, Scott, because we have another start-sit decision to make in an FFPC main event playoff game where we can go with RJ Harvey or Kenneth Walker. Rico Dowdle's locked in as our RB1 here. So Harvey or Walker, what would be your initial lean?
Yeah, I don't think that's close. I think it's Walker.
You think it's Walker over Harvey? I don't know. Coming out of the bye week, we could see. It's an interesting one. I think.
I feel like Harvey's a hopium guy. You got that bet on me, but like he really hasn't wowed me in any capacity.
All right, well, there we go. I think it's Walker. That was my lean. You could have talked me into RJ Harvey. We also have the option.
RJ Harvey has had over 12 rushing yards just twice over his last 8 games.
He had a 3 touchdown game too. All right, we have a couple more start-sit decisions for this one, but we'll talk about that one off air. But that's our initial lean at the running back spot. All right, Scott, your favorite player in fantasy football to talk about is Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is currently. I'm going to pull up the stat that I sent you earlier. He's since week 5, he is the wide receiver 7. Excuse me, since week 6, Wan'Dale Robinson is the wide receiver 7 overall in fantasy football. He is like a top 7 target earner right now, and the guy had a massive week this past week. It was the game that settled everything for DFS. Was using Jameis Winston at quarterback, and you had Wan'Dale Robinson, and then you were playing like Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Unbelievable performance from Jameis Winston. It was like a vintage Jameis game. He even caught a touchdown pass. But I think the actionable takeaway here Is Wan'Dale Robinson actually good at football? Are you ready to admit that, or is he just a PPR scam?
Yeah, let me take you on a journey of my relationship with Wan'Dale Robinson. In the 2022 NFL Draft, everyone clowned on the Giants for their pick of Wan'Dale Robinson, except me. I had a day two grade on him. I said he was an analytics darling. I said he had a lot of untapped upside because he was a running back, immediately converted to wide receiver, was the team's wide receiver one, and then went crazy with Will Levis. And so I loved Wan'Dale Robinson, and then he did nothing his rookie season. And then year 2 and year 3, everyone was every other fantasy site was like, you have to play Wan'Dale Robinson this week in DFS. He's too cheap. You have to play Wan'Dale Robinson. And every week I was like, no, he's a horrible play because he has no upside. He doesn't have tournament winning upside. We're never going to play Wan'Dale Robinson. He's basically a running back with this low ADOT PPR scam role. He doesn't score touchdowns. And so, yeah, I just like shit all over Wan'Dale, and I'm a Giants fan too. And he constantly got these third down targets where he would get tackled 2 yards shy of the first down marker. And it's like, what are we doing here? He was last year the worst player in football by EPA per target, EPA per catch. And so, I was a big Wan'Dale Robinson hater. And then this year, still Wan'Dale Robinson hater, except for he was playing Dallas. And I was like, I'm into Wan'Dale Robinson this week because Dallas's defense is just that bad. And he goes crazy. And I'm like, all right, Wan'Dale's my favorite player because I've only ever, he's never cost me money because he's never hit in DFS. And the one time I recommended him, he went off, except last week, he finally cost me money. I was like, I'm never playing Wan'Dale Robinson against Dallas. And he cost me so much money. I played Darius Slayton, and if you just like swap Darius Slayton with Wan'Dale Robinson, I would have won so much money. And yeah, like that's the thing is like, it's my bias. It's just the name. If I remove the name, I would have seen that Wan'Dale Robinson this year has a higher ADOT than Ja'Marr Chase. He has more deep targets than Ja'Marr Chase. He's no longer just a one-dimensional PPR scam. He's a complete receiver, and maybe he's not the best receiver in the world. He's not, but it's not like the Giants have anything better. Darius Slayton is not good. He's now playing behind Isaiah Hodgins. And so when you have Jameis Winston, who is like, has made me so much money in DFS and is so much fun for fantasy, you got to chase that. So crazy stat that you had, only Ja'Marr Chase has more targets since week 6. And since week 6, Robinson ranks where in fantasy points?
Since week 6, he's the wide receiver 7 overall.
Crazy.
It's
he's not there. He's he's higher than I want to admit. He's like a mid-range wide receiver too. Which is, maybe low-end wide receiver 2 when Jackson Dart comes back, but with Jameis, probably a tier above that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's sort of been a trend this year that the year 4 wide receivers, we've seen several of them take their games to like another level in terms of target earning, from Chris Olave, George Pickens just being that guy, and Wan'Dale Robinson, like you mentioned, it's the yards per reception. He's like over 12 yards per reception right now. He has an unbelievable amount of targets over the last 2 years. Just a really interesting player and sort of incredibly like overlooked this year in drafts. Wan'Dale was picked up on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues, or he was drafted very, very late, during the summertime. So Wan'Dale, super, super interesting. Let's talk about this offensive coordinator change in Vegas and how you anticipate this is going to affect the team. Greg Olsen takes over, and we saw what a miserable season from Chip Kelly. There was a great deal of enthusiasm about Chip Kelly coming from Ohio State. Back-to-back years, Scott, where the hot college offensive coordinator comes to the NFL and fails miserably. Ryan Grubb last year in Seattle coming from the University of Washington, took him to a national title game. That was disappointing, but he lasted a year. This was like 50 times worse. Dead last in scoring from the Vegas Raiders. Now Greg Olsen takes over. What do you anticipate this is going to look like? Does any player benefit from this?
I think Brock Bowers probably benefits. You see this a lot when there is a coach fired or a quarterback benched. The new guy comes in and at a bare minimum knows he needs to get the best players on the team the ball. So I would expect heavy target volume for Brock Bowers. Greg Olsen also historically targets tight ends at one of the highest rates in the league. His offense is historically extremely pass heavy, among the most pass heavy offenses of the past 3 decades by red zone pass rate. And so, yeah, I would expect heavy pass volume and hopefully some really good games from Brock Bowers. I would not be bullish on Ashton Jeanty, who may or may not have picked up a high ankle sprain. That's what some of the injury experts are speculating. And this is something John Proctor and I learned the hard way many years ago. Pete Carroll just lies about injuries. He is like the worst sort of injury optimist where you saw it earlier in the year with Brace Bowers. Jeanty might play through this, but I would not expect anywhere near close to his typical effectiveness. And so, yeah, just like if that's true, and like also given your defense, given your offensive line, I would expect an extreme pass heavy approach.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think with Raheem Mostert or Zamir White, I think there's a real lack of running back there. Ashton Jeanty, it's interesting to take a step back and sort of look at what Genty's been able to accomplish despite this horrible offense he's in, north of 15 points per game, and he's had 15 points or more in 6 out of his last 8 games played. So I don't know. I think with the amount of draft capital they put into him, if it is indeed a high ankle sprain, what's the point of him coming back this year? So I'm sort of with you. Pete Carroll might just be straight up lying to our faces again on this one. Would love to see Brock Bowers end the season on a really big high note here. Certainly I have a lot of exposure to Bowers in Dynasty, but it would just make sense for Bowers to sort of make at least a conversation heading in the offseason and not sort of leave a sour taste in anyone's mouth about drafting him this highly and sort of the overcorrection. So, yeah, definitely an offense that not a whole lot there, but let's bet on some Brock Bowers there. One more team situation, just curious your thoughts on this one. We talked about some changing the guard backfields. What about the Pittsburgh Steelers here? And I'll just throw Kenneth Gainwell's name out there. It's back-to-back games from Gainwell. We saw it in Week 11 with the big receiving performance. Now we see it in Week 12 where he actually ran very effectively. Now, some of those yards were on a manufactured sort of design play on a fake, but Gainwell's getting it done. And on the flip side, Jaylen Warren had caught at least 2 passes in every game this season, has zero catches this past week. Gainwell, again, having another decent game as a receiver. Is this a situation where you're willing to play Kenneth Gainwell heading into the fantasy playoffs with a little bit of confidence on this sort of PPR role plus?
No, probably not. I mean, great matchup this week, but yeah, I just do not trust Arthur Smith running backs. I think it's probably just a committee where they're cannibalizing each other's upside, unless there's a injury to one of them that knocks them out. But yeah, I would try and avoid that situation, but I don't know. Defer to our projections, I would say.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. Travion Henderson, I think that was a little bit of a sigh of relief that we didn't see too much Ramondre Stevenson. Of course, we need to get through the bye week. They play this week, and then we have that ugly Week 14 bye. Really, really good stuff. Scott, what do you have rest of the week? Again, you talked about your DFS content. Black Friday sale, you can get access to all that great DFS content we have over at Fantasy Points. What is your schedule looking like rest of the week?
Yeah, so Thanksgiving, we have the Thanksgiving slate breakdown. Jake Tribby is going to write that. Should be up Wednesday. I will edit that. We will do the Thanksgiving caching points episode, and then I will later in the week do the main slate caching points episode, the outside the box episode, and my main slate breakdown.
There you go. Access to all of it. Any feeling on a game that you think is going to tilt over this week? I know we talked about Thanksgiving with that Kansas City Dallas game. Any other games sort of jump out at you when you look at the schedule for this week?
All the best games are really on Thanksgiving. I think if you sorted by over under, it's those three, right?
Yeah, it has to be. I'm looking for a Sunday game. None of them are really that appealing.
It's Buffalo Pittsburgh, and even that is just not super inspiring. Or Patriots Giants, although that's super lopsided.
Arizona Tampa Bay could be a sneaky one. But if it's Teddy Bridgewater, not really. Yeah, there's not too much good stuff later in the week, but that's why you got to go read Fantasy Points. Scott's going to break it down. Scott, you've been running pure with your DFS calls. Make sure you're sticking with us here at Fantasy Points and Fantasy Points YouTube. Fantasy Football Daily, I had Dave Kluge on. Ryan Heath is filling in for me on the Start Sit show with Graham Barfield this week. What a deep bench we have at Fantasy Points, Scott, that I can just pick up the phone and get Ryan Heath to fill in for me on a podcast. That's going to be awesome. Make sure you listen to Graham and Ryan on the Start Sit show on Fantasy Football Daily. Make sure you're checking out all of our articles, our waiver wire content, Dynasty Market Report end of the week. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy playoffs this season.